and welcome to the Actual Tech Media EcoCast. My name is Jess, and I am excited to be here with you all today. But before we jump into our content, I have some basic information that I want to cover with you. All right, let's kick off our day here today by taking a quick tour of your audience console. And we're going to start with the questions window. So if you haven't already said hi, there is a whole audience of cool humans out there, so reach out and give a wave to the other members of the Actual Tech Media community. Now, keep in mind that if you do have any technical issues today, a browser refresh is going to fix just about anything. But if those tech gremlins are clinging on today, no problem. Just throw a comment in the question section and our crew will be there to help. We also want this to be an informative webinar for you, so throughout today's EcoCast, we hope you'll get engaged and ask all your burning questions. Not only will we have team members responding to you over a live chat, we will also have a dedicated Q&A session at the end of our presentations. Now, if we don't get to your question during the live webinar today, don't worry, because the awesome experts that we have here with us will be following up after we wrap. All right, next up, there's going to be lots of cool aha moments on the EcoCast today. And if you want to share those with your community, we've made it nice and easy for you. You can use the Twitter button right there in your audience console, and the hashtag for today's EcoCast will be automatically added to your post. All right, our last stop on this guided tour, be sure to check out the handouts tab for some awesome resources and takeaways from our speakers here today. We have an info pack collection, solution briefs, white papers, data sheets, free trials, ebooks, upcoming webinars, and more. So many great resources, so be sure to go explore. Now, if that wasn't enough fun, we also have some exciting prizes that we'll be giving away throughout today's EcoCast. I'm going to tell you a bit more about those later on, but a few quick reminders for you all. First, you do need to be here live in attendance at the EcoCast in order to qualify to win a prize, and we will follow up with all of you after we wrap. Now, all winners must submit an IRS Form W-9 to Actual Tech Media, and all winners must meet the Actual Tech Media prize terms and conditions. Now, if you don't know what those full T's and C's are, that's fine. We've got the full thing for you. Just head on over to that handouts tab, click in, scroll down to the bottom, and you'll find them waiting for you there. Now, the absolute most important thing to remember is that we love getting all your insightful questions during these live webinars. In fact, we love it so much that we actually have a special additional prize for all you inquisitive folks out there. So in today's EcoCast, we will be giving away a prize for the best question asked in each of our live sessions. Now, the expert speakers and teams will review all questions asked after we wrap the webinar, which means that even if your question does not get read out in a live session, there is still a chance to win. If you are a lucky winner here today and you would like to donate the value of your prize, we have several wonderful organizations that we partner with. So let us know when we follow up about your big win, and we'll get that rolling for you. Again, we are so happy to have you all here with us live at the EcoCast today, and we want to keep that good feeling going, so let's connect on social media. Reach out and connect with Actual Tech Media on Twitter and on LinkedIn. We have lots of great content, and we always want to hear from you. Now, if you're looking for more awesome content and resources right after we wrap the EcoCast today, be sure to subscribe to the Actual Tech Media channel on YouTube. Another fun way to win a prize and, hey, grow this awesome community is to refer an industry friend or a coworker to the Actual Tech Media webinar series. Now, you'll find a link to do that right in your handouts tab, and you will also be automatically redirected at the end of the webinar. And both you and your coworker or friend could win a prize, and we hold those drawings every month. So be sure to refer a friend because, hey, it could quite literally be a win-win situation. Next, we have a cool opportunity for all the decision makers out there to get connected with new and emerging tech and innovative vendors. Here's how it works. All you need to do is click on the link in your handouts tab, fill out a quick application, and the Actual Tech crew will then match you with some vendors that we think you should probably be chatting with based on your needs. There will also be fun opportunities that you get to choose to join in, like surveys, test runs, new solutions, extended demos, and so on. You'll get some chances to win extra prizes, you'll chat with great people, and you'll learn about the hottest new trends in tech. So be sure to apply, or hey, send that link to a decision maker on your team. Now, I want to take a quick minute here to remind you all about one of my favorite resources, and that is ransomware.org. You can find out everything you need to know about ransomware, how to prepare, prevent, and recover. This site is jam-packed with information, helpful tips, checklists, strategic approaches, case studies, everything you need in one place. So wherever you are in your ransomware preparedness journey, there is something for you at ransomware.org. Go check it out and start exploring. All right, I have one more exciting resource I have to tell you about today, and that is the Gorilla Guide Book Club. It's going to give you access to free enterprise IT books authored by top industry experts, so you can stay up to date on trending enterprise technology. And yes, these books will work on your Kindle, your mobile device, and as I said, they are completely free. You can download these awesome resources at gorilla.guide, and there's a link for you in that handouts tab as well. All right, well, we have covered a lot of important things already, and I don't know about you all, but I am excited to dive in. So let's get going. All right, folks. Well, it is time to get into the good stuff here today because we are talking about data protection and disaster recovery. And I think at this point, we are all on board with the wild and amazing things that are powered by good data. Scalability, personalization, growth, expansion, all these exciting things. And so we think a lot about how to collect data, how to optimize it, how to store it. And it is absolutely vital that we are thinking ahead on how to both protect and recover this all-important resource. And that is what we're going to dig into today with the help of some incredible expert speakers from industry leaders, Rubrik, CrashPlan, and Rackspace. I cannot wait to get into the conversation today. So let's get this show on the road here. All right, well, first up, I want to reintroduce myself. My name is Jess Steinbach. I am a moderator here at Actual Tech Media. I will be joined today by my fellow moderators, Keith Ward and Scott Becker on live chat. And let's go ahead and talk a little bit about prizes because I know everybody's ears perked up at that in the housekeeping. Today on the EcoCast, you could win one of three $300 Amazon gift cards. We will be giving those away to 3 lucky winners every 30 minutes. Now, you do need to be here live and present with us at the EcoCast. I mentioned this in the housekeeping chat this morning, but if you have questions about the full terms and conditions and who's eligible, click on over to that handouts tab and you can find the terms and conditions waiting for you there. But enough of that, let's get into our content. I am so excited to introduce our keynote speaker, one of the coolest people that we get to talk to about all things protection and recovery, and that is, of course, Melissa Palmer, technology analyst, VMware certified design expert, and all-around fascinating human. Melissa, it is always a great time starting an EcoCast with you. I can't wait to hear what you have in store for us today, so I will step back and hand things off to you. Take it away, Melissa.
Thank you so much, Actual Tech Media team. Today we're going to talk about 2 of my favorite topics, data protection and disaster recovery. Now, some people might be surprised to see these 2 topics put together, but the truth is you really can't have one without the other. Throughout my career, I've always had a hand in disaster recovery, and that kind of led to a pretty long path for me in the data protection space as well. So I want to share what I've learned with you. I've seen some really, really good things happen to organizations, but I've also seen some really, really bad things happen. So I want to give you a good baseline so you can kind of go forward and be prepared to create a data protection and disaster recovery strategy. Now, I can't really go any further without saying this word that I'm sure you're hearing everywhere, which is ransomware. Now, ransomware has fundamentally changed the face of both data protection and disaster recovery. You know, we've seen this rise in ransomware attacks over the last couple of years, which really brought these topics to light because we've seen a lot of organizations not have a good data protection or disaster recovery strategy, get hit by ransomware, and some organizations have either gone out of business. So a lot of organizations have struggled to get up to speed in this area. So we're going to break down these topics a little bit further and try to give you some actionable tips on how you can go forward with a great data protection and disaster recovery strategy. Now, it makes the most sense to start with data protection, but we can't protect our data until we understand the importance of it. I have a very strong VMware background too, and I've seen a lot of organizations that just kind of have like a catch-all backup job. When a new VM gets deployed, it gets backed up every 12 hours, once a day, what have you. That's a great baseline, and that's better than absolutely nothing. But we have to keep in mind that some of our data might be business critical and other data might not be very important. We need to get a handle on this before we can truly go forward and come up with a good strategy. In this context, we're going to talk about something called recovery objectives. And the 2 main things this breaks down into are recovery point objective, the point in time which I'm going to recover to, so how much data can I lose, and recovery time objective, or basically how long is it going to take me to recover this workload, system data, etc. Now, to determine these values, IT organizations really need to work cross-functionally with application teams and business teams to perform something called a business impact analysis. Now, depending on the industry you're in, these recovery objectives are often driven by things like how much money does an application make? And we've seen a lot of really good examples of this in this news lately. Or does this application have an impact on human life, right? If I'm in the healthcare industry. So we really need these recovery objectives to come up with a data protection plan, because we're going to protect our data differently depending on how we have to recover it. So let's do a couple of really quick examples. Let's go with an RPO of 30 minutes and an RTO of 30 minutes. So I can't lose more than 30 minutes of data, and I need to recover within 30 minutes. Now, a lot of things will come into this, such as how big is the application, how many servers, how much data, what's my data transfer rate. But generally speaking, when we're talking about low RPOs and RTOs, we're talking about some kind of replication technology, right? I'm replicating my data to another site, so it can then be used almost immediately. So let's just take an example of VMware. I have VMs, I'm replicating them to a second site at least every 30 minutes. If something happens, I flip the switch, I power on the VMs, and my application should be up in 30 minutes, no time at all. Of course, we do need to test this, which we'll talk about a little bit more in a few minutes. Now, I want to kind of go to another extreme here, an RPO of 12 hours and an RTO of 24 hours. Okay, so I can't lose more than 12 hours worth of data. That's a backup. It's not a big deal. And I have to recover it within 24 hours. Again, not a big deal to recover from backup, and we're going to test these things accordingly and make sure we can actually hit these numbers. So those are kind of like two different extremes here. And as you go through this application kind of business impact analysis process, you'll get a handle on each application and, okay, how critical is this to my organization? And how can I protect it the right way so I can recover it later? So here's where we're talking about recovery a lot, right? So we're talking about data protection now, but we have to have disaster recovery in mind as well, because we're thinking about the recovery process, and that will depend on how we protect our workloads. Also, things like where are we going to recover to, and of course, how long is it going to take with that RTO? Now, the rise in ransomware has also completely shifted the way that we need to plan for recovery. I've seen many organizations impacted where they can't actually recover in site for an attack. Because their site has been compromised, right? I can't go to that other vSphere cluster because, well, they got there too. I've seen threat actors also target backup systems. So it's really critical that we have multiple copies of our backup data, and that one of these copies, at least one of these copies, is immutable. Now, if you haven't heard about the concept of immutability, it's just a fancy word that says, hey, this data cannot be deleted and it cannot be modified. So the bad guys can't go in and delete it, and they can't encrypt it, which means you'll always have a backup someplace to recover to. Now let's recap these data protection basics, because some of them can be really important before we go on to talk about disaster recovery. We're protecting our data according to our business requirements, and then we need multiple copies of our data and multiple sites so we can recover later. Something that happens a lot is if you are ransomware, you contact the FBI, they come in, they take a look and they say, hey, we have to quarantine this environment and do our investigation. Or even you might have internal teams that are actually doing kind of the recovery and assessment, incident response, or you might be paying a third party to come in and do incident response, and they could say the same thing, hey, you can't touch anything until we figure out what's happened, and that can just grind your recovery efforts to a halt. So if you are talking about recovering to the cloud or an infrastructure as a service play or DR as a service, or you have a co-location facility or something hosted someplace else, that can help you start recovering while that active investigation is also going on. So that's why we need multiple copies of data pretty much anywhere we think we might need to recover from. And as you can tell, we've kind of dovetailed into disaster recovery, but let's take things a little bit further. Ransomware is, of course, a disaster, and a disaster recovery plan is a really good place to start if you have one already. We also must need to consider, traditional disasters like floods and power outages, but the ransomware word is probably what's going to help you get budget, quite honestly, if you really need to do an overhaul of your disaster recovery plan or you don't have one. In the past, it was really easy for organizations to say, well, this disaster recovery plan is going to cost too much to implement. And the chances of, a tornado hitting our data center are so low that we're just going to accept the risk and not do it, because it's going to be cheaper to rebuild everything in the next 5 years if we get hit once than it would be to implement it. Now, ransomware has fundamentally changed this game, because it's really not if an organization is a victim of a ransomware attack at this point. It's pretty much when. So this is going to go back to data protection. Before we can recover our applications, we of course need a good understanding of our apps and their components and our recovery objectives. Then we actually need to create a plan, or exactly how do we get these applications online? Do we start restoring from backup? Do we power up servers in a certain order? Do we need to do certain verification and testing to make sure the application is working as expected? Those are all things that go in a disaster recovery plan. We also want to have things like, okay, who are the application owners? Who are we contacting if a disaster is declared, so they can make sure that everything's functioning on their end as well. So it's really important to kind of have all those steps documented. And if you haven't done it before, to actually document those steps. This can take some trial and error. You might think you have everything ready to go. You start recovering your application and something doesn't work because you forgot a component. And this is why testing is so important. It's not a big deal to fail a disaster recovery test, right? The bigger deal is if you can't recover in a disaster. So I know a lot of times, even in my career, right, we had these disaster recovery tests where we restored a server and we said we were good to go. That was enough to please the auditors, but that's not enough to recover in a real world scenario. So really, after we have a plan, we need to test it and make sure we're meeting our recovery objectives. And this probably sounds like a lot of information, and it really can be. So let's talk about how to break this down a little further and make it a little easier. Now, I always suggest to people that start with a single app to kind of figure out your processes, right? Take that one app, do everything soup to nuts, figure out the application dependencies, and figure out your internal processes. How do you engage other teams when you need to? How do you verify things with business and application owners? And once you have that one app down and you've tested it and everything looks good, now is the time to look at, okay, what is our process for creating these plans, and can we apply automation? Because automation can save so much time and reduce the risk of doing something wrong during recovery. It will also allow for very frequent testing under different scenarios, so you can prove that you can meet your RPO and RTO at a moment's notice, or you find an error in your DR test and you can actually fix it. Now, when we talk about ransomware and threat actors, we know that vulnerabilities, software vulnerabilities and hardware vulnerabilities, are now the number one way that threat actors get in. So let me give you a tip to help you hopefully get even more budget for your disaster recovery planning and data protection planning, right? When you do a DR test, you've essentially created a copy of your environment and verified everything that worked, right? That is a great environment to use for things like patch testing. We see so many organizations are not up to date on patches because they can't test them. So if you can combine your patch testing with your DR testing, automate it and do it frequently, well, there's your ticket to reducing vulnerabilities in your environment. So hopefully we don't ever have to use these plans, right? I don't ever want to hear that you had to use your disaster recovery plan. But if you did have to use it, I want to hear that it worked because we put the due diligence in and we fixed everything ahead of time, so everybody's good to go. Automation is so key, but it's really important to understand your processes and understand how everything is going to work ahead of time. Now, today, we're going to hear from some amazing technology partners that can help you with everything we just talked about. They're going to help you revolutionize your data protection and your disaster recovery strategies, and I really can't wait to hear from them. So let's get started. Back to you, Actual Tech Media team.
Yep, Melissa, you nailed it. We have an all-star cast here with us today, just waiting in the wings to bring us some great information. Before we get into it, we have a quick question for all of you. What is your time frame for adding new or updating existing IT solutions at your company? So are you thinking short-term? Are you thinking long-term? What is the urgency of the needs that you have? And Melissa just gave us some great ideas of things that maybe some of you were thinking, oh yeah, I thought we had this plan, but we haven't checked it in a while. We haven't tested it effectively. Maybe we've tested it for compliance, but we don't know that it's actually going to get us to where we want performance wise. So there's a lot of questions that you can be asking yourself. And if you're thinking that those are a little bit more urgent, a little bit more short term, go ahead and click on the poll there. If you've got all the time in the world, or you really have no idea because maybe you're not even sure what the problems are yet, go ahead and click towards that not sure. No wrong answers here, and we promise we won't show your homework to anyone else in the EcoCast today. We're just kind of curious where you're at and what you're thinking about. So I'm going to give you guys a couple more seconds to do that. Countdown, 3, 2, 1, and we're going to move things along because it is time to kick off our EcoCast. And I am so excited to get things started on such a strong note today because we've got the Rubrik crew here with us. We will be chatting with Brian Escochea, Solution and Sales Engineer at Rubrik. Brian, I am so excited to hand things over to you. I know you've got some great stuff lined up for us. We're going to do some Q&A at the end. So all ears, Brian, take it away. Oh,
Perfect.
sorry,
Okay.
Brian, we had a little bit of a glitch. We got you now.
Alrighty, sounds good. So let me go ahead and hit next. So just to introduce myself, Brian Escochea, SC here at Rubrik. I've been here for a year based out of Austin, Texas. Before this, I was at VMware for almost 6 years as an SC across the software-defined data center, infrastructure, disaster recovery, networking, and security. I've also been in the Air National Guard, which is the military reserves, in a cybersecurity squadron for the past 9 years. And so I don't have a direct data protection background per se. It's more along the security and infrastructure side. But I came to Rubrik because of their mission for cybersecurity and resilience. And so I wanted to talk today about how traditional backup does not equal cyber resilience. And so we'll get started here. The main question we want to address is, can you recover from a cyber attack within 24 hours? And the reason we say 24 hours is if it goes past that from a downtime perspective, that means your entire company knows you're down. You're much more likely to drastically increase the cost of that downtime in the attack. And you might even make it to the news, which increases the reputation damage. And so I just a little bit of background. When I was in the military, still in the military, but when I was in a webinar as part of that training, the subject matter expert was going over how to secure your environment, right? How to minimize the attack surface, obviously defense in depth with multiple layers of security along the perimeter. And talking about honeypots, specific monitors files to monitor. And at the end of the day, he said, it doesn't matter how much you invest in security, you still have to assume that the security tools will fail and you have to assume breach. And so at that point, he said, well, you have to have a good backup solution, right? And at the time, years ago, I thought all backups were created equal. And it turns out that they're not, right? And so we want to talk today about how Rubrik on first copy can be recovered in the event of an attack. And I also want to encourage you, right? It's not because of the lack of confidence. It's not because of your lack of effort or training your staff or your due diligence, right? It's simply because 0-day vulnerabilities, human error, and it just happens even to the largest enterprises, right? Think of MGM just last week, right? They experienced at least a week of downtime. Over 100 ESXi servers were compromised. And they decided not to pay the ransom. Kudos to them, and they're going to rebuild from scratch, right? But the average number of security products in an enterprise is around 75 products, and they're still getting attacked, they're still getting breached, and so we want to provide a solution, right? And again, it's not because of incompetence; it's because of little things like this, right? So this is just one example of a phishing email. As a user, you open your email, you see that friendly Amazon logo, and it says there's an alert. We've been trying to contact you from suspicious activity, so it looks like it's trying to help you. And you can see as you hover over that link, it's a shortened Bitly address that goes somewhere else. You can see the address at the top. It looks like Amazon, but it's Maison.com. And so the little things that aren't always obvious to the end user, that in this case, it's urging them to act now to prevent fraud. And so they click on it, right? Or in the MGM grand case, that it was a LinkedIn member that was stalked from the attacker, and they called in impersonating that member of the IT team, and they reset the password that way and got access to their environment. So all that to say, you can invest millions of dollars in security, but at the end of the day, we have to assume breach. And so let me give you a little bit of background of what Rubrik is, what we do. Okay, so we're essentially a modernized backup solution, right? We started with VMware at the start and back in 2015, and we've evolved into unstructured data. We've also evolved into cloud workloads and SaaS workloads like 365. So from a single UI, you can recover a VM from vSphere, Hyper-V, Nutanix, etc., a SQL database, a 365 mailbox or SharePoint site, as well as EC2 or Azure VMs or Azure SQL, all of that under from a single pane of glass, right? And you control the data locality, right? We enforce multi-factor authentication to gain access to Rubrik Security Cloud. We also are immutable, right, on first copy. And so that's the thing that we want to focus on. And then further, aside from just immutability, we also want to talk about the rest of the architecture. So on the left, you see the general architecture of a backup of our backup solution. And in the legacy solutions, they basically rely on the front end compute, right? So they install servers on the hypervisor usually to as backup proxies, as management servers, and things like that. And so with 60% of attacks now happening at the hypervisor level, all of those backup services are going to be compromised, right? And also, if you're writing to a storage target, right, that's traditional read-write, traditional NFS or SMB, right, those backups can be compromised, and that's one of the first things they'll do is they'll go to the backups, delete them or encrypt them, and then they'll encrypt the production environment, leaving you, number one, either having to pay the ransom, or two, recover from tape or from cloud, right, which increases the downtime, increases the cost and impact and brand damage. And then also, right, if you're recovering from cloud, then there goes the egress fees through the roof, right? So by giving you a hyper-converged, hardened appliance that is air-gapped from the network, that is immutable by design, immutability cannot be disabled or turned off. It's built into the file system itself. It's a append-only file system. And so this is just some of the key features I wanted to talk about. You can take a screenshot here, or you'll get this deck afterward, but that's kind of how we do what we do. And this is specifically for on-prem, and then we also obviously support cloud workloads as well. All right, so maybe you say, hey, well, I already have immutable backups, and so why would I need Rubrik, right? So let's talk about the typical attack chain, right? So normal dwell time has decreased from about 21 days to about 5 days median dwell time for an attacker. And so that just means they're getting more skilled, they're getting faster, and then once they get in, right, they start to escalate privilege, they compromise AD, they exfiltrate data, right, and most of the time they look for sensitive data, PII, and so that is what is valuable to you, and that's what could cause regulatory fines if leaked. And so. And then once they go through all that, they encrypt the data. It takes about less than five hours to encrypt all the data that they have access to. And usually it's over a weekend or a holiday, and so you don't really know about it right away. And so the questions we have to answer are, I'll hear reveal in just a second, but out of all of that happens, you have to ask what the clock is ticking, and the business impact is increasing, right? So we talk about what are the things that we have to do, right? Number one, can we recover, right? Is your infrastructure and the data immutable, right? If we're relying on a virtual server, right, to recover, and that server's been encrypted, well, there goes your chances of a quick RTO, right? Then we talk about what do we recover? Is it very easy to ascertain what is the blast radius of that attack if your EDR has been bypassed? So we give you that ability. right? And then you want to know what has been stolen, right? Is there any potential PII that was leaked? And so I'm going to try to speed this along to get to a demo. But this, again, these are the questions that we want to answer. And then also when to recover to, right? If we just assume 24-hour, recover to the 24 hours ago before the encryption happened, a lot of the times that malicious payload has been sitting dormant. And if you recovered it 24 hours ago, that payload can detonate again, reinfecting or re-encrypting your environment, which is very, very common and what we're seeing with even our customers. Speaking of our customers, we've had over 150 customers been attacked with ransomware, and none of them have been required to pay a ransom, and none of them have lost any data. And then finally, how long will it take, right? Do you have a way to automate the recovery, reduce downtime, and test that, right? So we give you the ability to orchestrate the process, pre-plan those VM failovers and recoveries, and be able to test that. So this is how we do it, right? So number one, everybody gets that the data vault, right? Out of the box, it's immutable, it's air gapped, and it's got built-in scanners to provide that further insight to help lower the RTO, such as the encryption detection, right? So we scan every single backup that we take. We look for anomalies like mass deletion or encryption. And then if you do get impacted, we show you the complete list of servers that were impacted right away. Then we give you the ability to proactively and reactively scan for sensitive data and see whether or not any of that sensitive data was involved in that blast radius. And then this is really important, right? The threat hunt capability. So we can use the Rubrik appliance as basically a time machine to sift through and scan for that malicious payload to know, number one, where is the infection? Because you might have 50 or 100 virtual machines that are all encrypted, but maybe only 2 or 3 of them are actually infected. So we show you which ones are infected and when it entered your environment, which is key to knowing when that clean point in time to recover is. And then the final piece, and this is specific to vSphere workloads, but the ability to pre-plan those recovery plans and build those out to test and fail over to either the local site that we have or to a remote site. Now, from a disaster recovery perspective, we can definitely use replication from Rubrik appliance and fail over to a DR site. But more than likely, it's going to be a cyber attack versus a flood or fire, and that's what we're focusing on. And then that's where we can give you that quick RTO with the first copy of data that we protect for you. And then finally, a lot of solutions will give you the backup solution, but then run for the hills if you experience a ransomware attack. So with Rubrik, everybody gets access to a 24/7 team of experts, right? So their only job at Rubrik is to respond to attacks for our customers. They average about 1 to 2 per week. And so they're trained to help you recover from an attack, do the threat hunt capability if you require that, coordinate conversations and such with any of your incident response team or third party teams. And so this is something that we're very proud of to offer, and so we're not going to leave you high and dry if you do get attacked. And so with that being said, let me go ahead and pivot over to the demo environment. Now, I know that we're running on time, so I'm going to kind of breeze through that and then leave time for questions as well. All right, so everybody should be seeing my screen. This is our Rubrik Security Cloud, right? Central console to manage all of your backups. So these are your physical locations with the actual hardware appliances protecting, and you can replicate across bidirectionally if required. We protect data center workloads, vSphere, Hyper-V, AHV, SQL, etc. SaaS for 365, and then your cloud workloads as well. Now, here's what I really wanted to focus on today is the threat analytics, security posture, and orchestrated recovery. So I'm going to go ahead and just kind of walk through how do we respond to an attack. So the first thing is we'll go to investigate. Number one, you want to know what has been impacted. What's the blast radius? So in this case, we're looking at the past 24 hours. For the object type, I'm going to choose vSphere, Hyper-V, right, file sets. And just kind of walk you through right? This is what we're looking at. So you've got deleted files across the board for all these servers, and then the same number of suspicious files that were added to those servers. And so this is very indicative of a ransomware attack, right? The good data is gone, it's deleted, and that data has been encrypted and re-added to that environment. And so with a single click, right, we can go into that server, go to browse, go down to the file level and see exactly what is going on. We could see all of the original data that was there, right? So, and then the suspicious data that replaced it with that lockbit extension. And so it's very easy. If there's an urgent need for some copies of data, right, we can recover that, hit download, and then hand that data off to whoever needs it, and then go on about the investigation and recovery process. And then if you want, right, you can also recover the full snapshot, right? But as I mentioned earlier, we need to understand when the clean point in time is, because if we just go to the day before the encryption, that reinfection is most likely to occur. And so that's where we introduced our threat hunt capability. And remember, this is all based on feedback from our customers that were experiencing ransomware attacks. They were asking us to lower the mean time to recover. And so we introduced threat hunting, right? We can do a threat hunt based on YARA rules, file hashes, or file patterns, right? To use the, again, Rubrik environment as a time machine to sift through to figure out what servers were impacted. And so I'm not going to run a new scan. I'll just use one that was already run here. And so in this case, we've got 2 positive hits. It was a YARA rule scan. In this case, we've got 10 matches across 1 file. And we've got 50 matches across 5 files. And we can even go into there and show you exactly what files were those positive hits. So this tells us a couple things. Number one, it tells us that, hey, these are the 2 servers out of, let's say, 100 that were actually infected. So all of the other VMs can be recovered to the most recent snapshot before the attack happened. And then the other thing it tells us is that these servers that were infected, well, now we've got the earliest match snapshot that has a positive hit. So in this case, it's September 19th. So we just need to roll this back to the 18th to prevent any reinfection or re-encryption. You can see this one here, the dwell time was much longer, back to July 30th, right? And so you can easily go in here and hit quarantine. And so that prevents any Rubrik admin from accidentally restoring any of these infected servers back into production. Again, lowering the RTO. And then something we just released as well is threat monitoring. So now not only do we do proactive or reactive threat hunts, but we do threat monitoring for all the data that we back up for you and protect based on our Intel feed, and as well as we subscribe to a third-party Intel feed as well. And then if we go back to the blast radius. So now we want to know, the other piece of the puzzle is, was there any sensitive information in scope of that attack, right? So you can see this column here, sensitive files, 66, 65, 31, and we can hit view and data discovery, and it takes us straight to that dashboard to show what files were impacted, who had access to them, where it exists. And so the idea here is to know this information ahead of time before an attack happens, because we scan every single snapshot we scan, and then reactively be able to call bluff on the attacker, because the attacker will say, hey, we've already got your data, so go ahead and pay this ransom anyway. Well, we can say, hey, you might have the data, but none of it is sensitive, right? Because on the blast radius, we can show that there's no sensitive files across the board. And so this is a proactive tool and a reactive tool. The final piece I'll just briefly touch on, because I know we're running out of time. The ability to create recovery plans to fail over either locally or remotely. And so you can see here, this blueprint has got a number of VMs with priority groups of which ones will boot up first. You can include post-boot scripts. You can also include, what target resources are going to fail over to. So that is the quickest demo I've ever given of Rubrik Security Cloud, but hopefully this has been valuable.
I like that. Speed demos. That's our next webinar.
Yeah.
That was awesome. And you crammed a lot in, but you definitely hit all the important highlights. So I know the audience was really enjoying that as well. And it's so exciting when we get demos, because we get to see it in live action. And I have to say, especially the Rubrik UX and just the dashboard, the look of it is so beautiful. I always
Yeah.
enjoy digging in.
Yeah, and why, to me, it's great that we have an easy UI, but it doesn't matter how easy it is if the data's not there to recover from in the event of attack. It doesn't matter, right? So
Boy, that's such a good point. You really have to have all things kind of working together, because you could say something similar if you have the data but nobody knows how to access it. And in your case, you've got both things working in conjunction. It's you have the data
yeah.
and it's easy to access and easy to get what you need out of it.
Hmm.
Uh, so yeah, cheers to Rubric on that. I do want to point out before we get into the Q&A here that we do have a poll up for all of you out there in the audience. And what we're wondering is, what is the additional information you would like to get about the Rubric solution? So we obviously just got some great information from Brian, and there's so much more to cover. As Brian said, he was doing sort of the hits and highlights kind of demo. And so if you'd like to have a little bit of a longer demo, a more involved demo, if you want to get into some case studies, click on that poll right now and let Rubric know how they can follow up with you. While you're doing that, Brian, you ready to dig into some audience Q&A here?
Sure thing.
All right, well, let's start with this one here. I've already got synchronous replication with active data centers. Isn't that enough, Brian? What do you think?
Yeah, so number one, that's an outstanding setup, right? If you have the ability to afford a secondary site and have synchronous replication going, kudos. That will help in a physical disaster, right? If your primary site goes down from a power outage or fire, flood, et cetera. The problem is if it's a cyber attack and you've got synchronous replication going, well, all the encryption that happened is also going to replicate to the DR site. And so you have to have that recovery ability from the immutable backup. You also have need the ability to do that threat hunt, to know when the clean point time is. All of this is going back to the mean time to recover. That all goes into the survivability of an organization, and you as an individual at that company.
Well, I'm really glad someone asked this next question, because I'm curious about it myself when we talk about ransomware and disaster recovery. And often I think seeing those as one and the same, and then in some cases, some distinct differences. So a question here from the audience: should businesses be prioritizing ransomware recovery capabilities over disaster recovery?
Yeah, so ransomware equals downtime. Downtime equals disaster, right? So if it comes down to either or, right? If we can't afford a secondary site, then yes, let's prioritize the budget on cyber resiliency, so that number one, if we can't survive a flood, but let's at least survive the more common attack of that cyber incident. And so that's, in my book, that's number one. And that's why I came here to Rubric. Now, on top of that, we can phase the approach as well, right? Because we can instantiate either a second site at the time of budget allotment, right? Or we can spin up to a cloud environment, or we can spin up to, we have a managed service provider that offers disaster recovery as a service, right? So if you don't want to invest in a colo, right, they can use their compute and their target as a replication target.
Okay. I think we're getting close to the end of time. I'm going to sneak in this last question here. How can Rubric help with disaster recovery to a second site?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, we support site-to-site replication between Rubric appliances. And so we can build out that blueprint to fail over to the recovery at the second brick or second data vault. And you can use that on a physical site or in a cloud environment as well. So site to site or site to cloud.
Awesome. I love it. Okay. Well, lots of good things happening and lots to think about. Definitely. Unfortunately, I think we'll have to leave it there. But for anyone out there in the audience that has gotten really excited about Rubric, and I think that's all of them, what would you recommend as that first step for the folks out there today, Brian?
Yeah. I'm an employee at Rubric, right? I'll offer my time. If you want to talk to me directly without getting sales involved, I'm happy to do that, Brian Escochea. But otherwise, go to Reddit, go to Google, go to our website, and just do your own research. Either way, I've dropped in a 10-step plan to help recover from a cyber attack as a best practice guide. So hopefully that helps.
Yes, absolutely. And that 10-step guide is actually in the handouts tab. So if you haven't already explored that handouts tab, make sure you go over there now. There's a rubric handout link there. So click on that. You're going to get, it's almost like an infographic style. It's really nicely laid out and it's got the sort of 10-step checklist. So that's a great place, Brian. I don't know, for some of the folks out there, they might be reading it and thinking very smugly, like, yes, I've done all of this. And for some of them, it might be, oh my goodness, we've done half or not all of this. So I think that is a great takeaway for the folks out there. And I like the suggestion. That's the first time I've heard someone say Reddit. That's an interesting suggestion. I like that as well. Well, I think that's all the time we've got for today. So we're going to wrap things up there. But Brian, thank you so much for being here with us today. It's been a lot of fun chatting with you.
Thanks so much. Have a great one.
All right. And for everyone out there that has clicked on the poll, keep those responses coming in. Let Rubric know how they can follow up with you. Make sure you've got that handout and keep those questions coming in. I know we didn't get to all the questions today, but we are going to make sure that you get some answers back on those in follow-up. So you'll either get a live chat response today or email in follow-up to the webinar. So keep the questions coming. While you're doing all of that, I'm going to go ahead and give away our very first $300 Amazon gift card. And let's see, our very first winner here today is Mark Jones of Alaska. Mark Jones of Alaska, you have won a $300 Amazon gift card. Congratulations to you, Mark. Hope it's a beautiful day up there in Alaska, and we will be following up with you about your $300 Amazon gift card, so stay tuned for that. All right, my friends, well, we are going to keep things moving right along, because as you can see, we have another incredible team lined up for us. And this is a dynamic duo here. We will be chatting next with Fleetus Poston III, Senior Manager, Security Operations, and Tony Schwant, Senior Product Manager, both at CrashPlan. Fleetus, Tony, I know you guys have a great presentation lined up that I think Fleetus is going to walk us through. Then Tony's going to come in for a demo. Then stick around for some Q&A. Holy, we have so much to do. Lots coming up. So I am going to step back and hand things on over to you. Fleetus, take it away.
Thank you very much. As we will be continuing the discussion on data protection and disaster recovery, CrashPlan will be focusing this presentation on the endpoint. So my name is Fleetus Poston. I am the Senior Manager of Security Operations here at CrashPlan. I've been with the company just over a year now, and I'm excited to discuss with you today data protection and recovery from an endpoint-centric point of view. So who is CrashPlan? We are a secure, scalable, straightforward endpoint backup and recovery solution, and we focus on 4 major use cases. So ransomware recovery, disaster recovery, self-service restore, and legal hold. As we go through our presentation today, we will discuss several of these use cases, but not all of them. But if you have questions about them, feel free to reach out to us and we'll be happy to dive deeper into them with you. So let's start with the endpoint essential to all work. All of us today rely heavily on our endpoints to get our jobs done in a successful and timely manner. We store multiple different types of information on our endpoints. It could be a request for a proposal, it could be your board minutes or presentation, a lot of timely information that you would like to have access to in real time. And if you lost, would cause significant rework in your organization, loss of productivity, and potentially a financial loss. So we need to take time to understand why we protect the endpoint, why we want to focus on these apps that are sitting on your box. So today, a lot of us work remotely. It's hard to separate your corporate life or professional from your personal. According to a recent study by OneLogin, 37% of people who work remote have allowed someone else to use their endpoint, their laptop, their Mac, or their Windows. Think about that for a second. You now have endpoints that are being accessed by a non-employee. They can be downloading files, they can be accidentally deleting your files, corrupting your files. So it's important to make sure that we understand what's on our endpoint and to properly protect it. So you want to make sure you can get that proposal when you need it. You can get to your board presentation. And CrashPlan allows you to have that peace of mind, that comfort of knowing that what's on your endpoint is properly backed up and can be restored when the time is needed if something happens to it. So the data and the endpoint is fragile. 45% of your business data is not stored in the cloud. So that means the only copy of that data is sitting on your Windows laptop, desktop, or your Mac. Think about that. You have a single copy of it that's not stored anywhere else. Another interesting fact here is Harvard did a business study review, and 67% of employees admitted that they broke their security policy to get their job done within the last 2 weeks of that study. So in a 2-week period, a 14-day period, 67% of the employees surveyed admitted that they circumvented the security policies to get their jobs done. That's a little scary to think about. So data vulnerabilities with employee transferring. So let's think through that for a little bit. You're hired on with the new company. You're giving your rights. You have the ability to see certain files. A recent study showed that most employees have access to over 1 million files when they join a company due to the way their access is set up. Inside the Financial Institute, 64% of financial services employees have over 1,000 files that are sensitive that they have access to. Let me repeat that again. They have 1,000 sensitive files that they can have access to. Data, it's important. And your access is important and needs to be audited and needs to be checked. So another thing, think about data exfil and data deletion. This could be malicious, or this could be just you being forgetful, getting busy, forgetting. So for example, I have a friend who was a designer and came in, got their new asset, sat down and wanted to look at the legacy files from their predecessor. So they looked at the portal, they looked in their software, and they could not find the data files, the source files for their projects. They panicked. They went to their manager's office, and the manager said, "Oh, that laptop's already been sent to IT to be wiped." Luckily, this friend of mine was able to get there and to get that device before IT wiped it. If they were within an hour or two later, all of that would have been gone. That employee, that friend of mine, would have had to start from scratch from years worth of design work. For anyone who's done design work, that's years worth of work to still be done, not just years of data loss. Knowledge transfer. Because we're backing up files, because CrashPlan is actively backing up your files, if I change roles, you can just copy my working folder and give it to the person who takes my job or to backfill me. Or if I was to leave the company and I had working files that were only on my laptop, my desktop, you have the ability to move to them and just transfer it seamlessly to them without having to download it or find it. It could just be on their laptop. You could just point it to their endpoint. It'll be sitting in their C drive or in their documents folder on their Mac, and they can start working seamlessly. Additionally, this helps mitigate damage of files that were not supposed to be shared, because if you are breached, you're able to find out what was on the machine. I'll tell a story here in a little bit about what that looks like, but think about that. You have knowledge of what files were present on that machine because we're actively backing it up with a CrashPlan agent. So here's that story I was alluding to. Let's just say an executive admin is hit with ransomware. The executive admin immediately thinks, "Oh, there's nothing important on my laptop. I don't have access to customer data. I'm not part of our research and development." But the executive admin has been responsible for all the travel, the lunches, and other matters for the executive team at the company. So what they did is they created a spreadsheet on their desktop that had all the credit card information, all their contact information, and it's sitting right there on the desktop. So as a CrashPlan customer, you would be able to know that now this user had sensitive information sitting on their box, that you could start your fraud and identity protection for all these executives because you know that that data was leaked as part of this breach. So knowing what's on the endpoint can be just as important as recovering the files. Let that sink in for a second. Just knowledge of what's on your endpoint can be just as important as recovering the files. So let's keep the data off the endpoint. So your two options here are cloud collaboration tools and network shares. So cloud collaboration tools are those that you see, such as your sync and share. So that's your Google Drives, your OneDrive, and then you got your file share systems. Both of these comes with drawbacks. Both of these require you as the employee to follow policy. I've already shared earlier that employees are comfortable stepping outside of the bounds of their policy. They're willing to get things done just to get their job done. With cloud collaboration tools, they're convenient, but it's the opposite of a backup. It's inconsistent. The workflows may not be as seamless, and the data stored is not a second copy. It's the document. It's the version. There's no versioning controls for you. So you need to be very careful with that one. Also, when you're using cloud collaboration tools, you're allowing multiple users to interact with that file. If the version is not set up correctly and it's deleted, you don't have the history of that file. And then the legacy network shares. We've all used them if we've been around for any extensive time. You've opened up your Windows, you've gone into your drives, and you see a letter. Your IT team has likely mapped a drive that's pointing to a network area, a NAS share for you, a network share. Your files are being synced by a policy on the box on a given interval for you. But many users don't ever check these things. They don't check to make sure the health of their sync and share is working, that their drive is constantly mapped. And I've worked many instances where an employee may forget to check both of these and just lose the document because their hard drive failed, their laptop got stolen, and this is not a fun day for the employee. So back to that, with the CrashPlan agent, it's seamless. It's transparent to the user. They don't have to make sure it's collaborating. They don't have to make sure that the drive is mapped after monthly patching or after a vacation or after a refresh. So what about policies and training? We've talked about those a little bit already. Most people know what the right path to take is, but they often take the lesser of the two for the more direct. So what that means is if your policies and procedures require the user to do something, and if it slows productivity, they're not going to do it. They're going to choose the least resistance. And that's what we talked about earlier, where they're going to circumvent your controls to make sure that they're getting their job done in a timely manner that doesn't impact their productivity. So we need to build the right path. We need to remove those shortcuts and make it the path. So what that means is we need to make disaster recovery and data protection seamless, transparent, and automatic for the users. CrashPlan does this. We have the ability to drop the agent or to install the agent on your box, let the user start working, and then within minutes, the files are back on their box when they have a hardware refresh. Or every 15 minutes, as long as you're internet connected, your files are being synced back up. So if and when you need that file, you have access to it. You have a peace of mind. So I alluded to these already. The automatic collection. When you set up, your admin sets up what paths they want to collect. If it's your desktop, your downloads, your whatever is automatically there. This is done transparently to the end user. Another value of CrashPlan is we truly allow unlimited backup. So every version of that file is sitting in our product. So if you get ransomed on today and you know that your last backup was an hour ago of that file because that's when you last touched it, you can roll back to that file. You can restore to just that point and know that you have a valid file. We support Mac, Windows, and Linux. So you can choose the operating system that you're most comfortable with and back up your files. I've alluded to the self-service. You're going to see in the demo here shortly by Tony, our senior product manager, what it is if you need that file. So you've lost that presentation because your hard drive failed, you spilled that cup of coffee on your laptop this morning and it's no longer there. You can restore that presentation after you install the CrashPlan on your new agent and be right back up and running. And it meets the employees where they're at, where they're working. Very little work, and you're meeting the employees where they work. So Schrodinger's cat. The only way to describe the cat in the box is both dead and alive. It goes the same way for your data. It's not the backup that's important. It's a validated recovery. So you need to know that at any given time you have a backup. So I challenge you all to go restore a file that you've backed up. Make sure you first have a copy of it. Second, that you can restore it and it's the right version that you expect to restore. Because until you've validated your backup with a validated recovery, you're just hoping for the best. So I challenge each and every one of you to think through, are you backing up? And can you restore? And if you restore, is it what you expected to restore? Is it the full file? Is it the full presentation? Is it actually that bid, that proposal that you plan to present? So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Tony Swant, our senior product manager, who's been with CrashPlan for over a decade, to give you a demo of our product, and we look forward to your questions.
All right, thank you, Felitus. Excited to be here and kind of show off CrashPlan and what it can do. So what I have up here is the CrashPlan agent, and that gets installed on your employees' endpoints. And really, this is a convenience factor for them and one of our main value props for end users. So say your top salesperson downloads a customer PowerPoint deck before a customer on-site because they know they'll have spotty internet access. And to Fleeta's point earlier, even though this is against policy, she needs to get the presentation done, so she just goes ahead and does it. So she downloads it, she works on it in the airport, the hotel lobby, uploads all the, updates all the customer specific data, and even starts on a new customer's slide deck. Goes to bed, wakes up in the morning, and realizes she completely saved the new customer's deck over the old one. So in the sync and share world, it's an IT ticket. It's trying to figure out where that file is, how to get it back. With CrashPlan, it's just as easy as restore the files. I know it was in my downloads. There it is. And click on that little clock icon, and you can see all of the various versions that have been backed up. It completely backs up in the background, totally invisible to the end user. Whenever they get internet access, it backs up that new version. So it's easy to just select that one looks like the right one, and then I'm going to restore it to my desktop and rename it so I'm not overwriting anything. I can check it out before I actually need it. So this is great from the end user's perspective. I don't need to involve IT. I don't need to really do anything except open a program and download that latest version. So the same thing happens with, or the same process works for malware, accidental deletions, really anything that happens to the end user's device up into and including hardware failure. Log in on a new device, same username, password, and restore all the data that you need. So that is the end user's perspective. And from the admin perspective, there we go. All right, from the admin user's perspective, the same thing can be done from here, navigating to the user's device, hitting restore, and there's all their files. They can select the files they need and select where to restore that data with all the same options. But for admins and security professionals, the use cases go a little bit further than just purely restoring the data. So we had a client, or we had a customer who suffered a break-in, and actually about a dozen of their laptops got stolen. And through their process of investigation, they realized that one of the laptops hadn't been registered with their MDM and therefore was not encrypted. So they had a data spillage event they needed to disclose to the people, or disclose to their customers, that their information may have been compromised. However, with CrashPlan, it was installed, and they were able to go through and search for files that may have contained that information, selected them, restored them down to the investigator's machine, opened them up, and specifically were able to find what exact information was may have been leaked, what exact customers would have been impacted, and they could target their communications to those specific customers, and they could tell them exactly what was impacted. And so that limits the disclosure and the PR ramifications there. And so that's just kind of some additional use cases that the admin and security teams find valuable with CrashPlan. And so that is really the demo that I want to show you. So Jess, do you have any questions from the audience?
Yeah, we have a bunch of questions coming in. That was so great. I like a short and punchy demo, like right into it, Tony. That was great. Okay, well, let's get into some audience questions here. I'm going to start with this one. Are CrashPlan's versions capable of being used for very strict data retention policies or discovery?
Yes, actually. So we do have our legal hold matters, or our legal hold module integrated with the product here. So through the preservation policy, the legal team can collect additional files, additional versions, save deleted files forever. And so they can really ratchet up what is being kept. And that's completely separate from the IT side of things. And then as soon as they add somebody to a matter, they add the custodian, they have the number of devices, they're automatically starting to do that broad capture. And so when that data is needed, if that data is needed, they can sit here, or the legal team can go in themselves, click the Get Files button, and they're prompted with that same restore dialog that we saw before, where they can go through and select what they need, where they need it, and restore the original permissions and metadata for those files as well.
I like that customization, getting only what you need when you need it. Okay, we're going to try to squeeze in one more question here as we get to the end of our time. What security measures does CrashPlan employ to protect data during backup and transmission? And how does it ensure data integrity and privacy? That's a good question. What do you got for us,
That's a
Tony?
long one.
Yeah.
So CrashPlan does use AES-256 encryption for the blocks as well as the transmission or TLS 1.2 SSL encryption. The integrity is checked. So CrashPlan does all of the deduplication, encryption, compression client side. So all of that is done before that block of data ever leaves your computer. And in terms of the integrity piece, we checksum the block, and then when we send it up, that checksum gets validated on our storage server side in order to make sure that it was transferred correctly. And then every few days or on a schedule, we have what we call archive maintenance, where the storage server goes through and double checks that the blocks are still there to protect against bit rot or anything like that. And if it finds that a file is damaged, it removes it from the manifest and re-requests it from the endpoint.
Perfect. All right. Well, Tony, I wish we could keep going, but we are getting pretty close to the end of time here. So I think we're going to have to wrap it up. But before we let you go, for anyone out there that just fell head over heels in love with CrashPlan, and I think between you and Fleetus, you've made quite the pitch for that. What do you recommend as their first step to getting started?
First step to getting started is just go to our website, crashplan.com. So we've got white papers. You can request a demo, get in contact with us, and we'd be happy to give you a deeper dive.
Awesome. All right. Well, a big thank you to Fleetus. A big thank you to you. This has been such a great chat, a really interesting look inside CrashPlan. I appreciate your time today, Tony.
Thanks.
Okay, and now you can see that it is your turn to answer a question. Tony did such a great job, and now we're flipping it around on you. So what additional information would you like to get about the CrashPlan solution? We obviously just got such a great intro between Fleetus and Tony, that demo, lots and lots covered, and there's so much more to dig into. So be sure that you're clicking on that poll. Let the CrashPlan team know how they can follow up with you. Think of this as like hitting the easy button, right? Like you're telling CrashPlan exactly what you want, and then they will give you exactly that. So click on that poll And I will also make sure that I remind you all to head on over to the handouts tab. Click on that handout from CrashPlan, and you can get this great takeaway, how CrashPlan protects business data with continuous automatic backup. This is a great read and an awesome follow-up to the conversation that we just had. So make sure you've got those poll questions answered. You've got that handout downloaded. Keep those questions coming in, because anything that we don't get to in live chat today, we will make sure that you get a follow-up in email. So lots of answers coming your way. Chris, I see you. I love that you got a lot out of this. I see that there was a lot of info that resonated with you, Venkat, as well. That's awesome. Love seeing that coming. All right, my friends, while I'm stalling because it's time to get to a prize giveaway, a little bit of a drum roll on that one. So let's do a $300 Amazon gift card. And now a quick reminder that you do need to be here live and present at the EcoCast in order to win. Our very next lucky winner here of a $300 Amazon gift card is Jeanette Walling of Washington. Jeanette Walling of Washington. Congratulations to you, Jeanette. As always, we will be in touch about claiming your prize after we wrap up. And I do want to remind you all that there is that best question gift card from each one of our sessions. So even if we don't get to you in a live Q&A, you are still entered to win just by asking those questions. So keep those coming in, not just because you could win a prize, also because it really brings up that whole energy and engagement and involvement of the conversation. I am loving seeing all the participation from our crew here today. So keep that up as we move into our last session. Oh man, you heard me say it. It is already time for our last session of the day. But don't worry, we are definitely wrapping up on a high note, keeping the good times rolling, because as you can see, we now get to chat with the awesome crew from Rackspace Technology. So our speaker here with us today, Michael Levy, Director, Private Cloud Product Management at Rackspace Tech. Michael, thank you so much for being here with us today. You're wrapping us up, bringing us on home. I can't wait to hear what you have in store for us. So I'm going to hand things on over to you. Take it away.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Hopefully I can close this out nicely for you guys. So I am Michael Levy, a director of our private cloud product at Rackspace. We are one of the original managed service providers, now a multi-cloud service provider, have over 2 decades of experience. And today we're going to talk about best practices for disaster data protection and disaster recovery. So these two concepts really work in conjunction with each other. The biggest difference between the two is the destination in which you recover. One thing that is similar about both of these concepts is that most customers we come across, and we have a few 100,000 customers in our portfolio, is that they're positioned incredibly poorly when it comes to data protection and disaster recovery. And with the rise of ransomware attacks, this has very much been in discussion. And still, even with digital adversaries out there intensifying, the majority of events, less so than before, but still a majority of events that trigger data protection or disaster recovery in action can be attributed to human error, like a misconfiguration. But as we're discussing these concepts, we really want to be cognizant of natural disasters, cyber attacks, and human error, and be prepared to remediate these issues regardless of what has caused them. So what we've done, given the landscape out there is so unpredictable and organizations don't really know how to have themselves ready for the threats that are looming out there, is we've synthesized the voices of our hundreds of thousands of customers, spoken to market research analysts, worked with our veteran high-level engineers to come up with what we see as best practices when it comes to both data protection and disaster recovery. And then we have formulated solutions where we can help deliver on these best practices. and help them when it comes to the time-consuming, CapEx-intensive, OpEx-intensive inputs that are requisite to be able to bring these best practices to fruition and effectively implement them. So when we talk about data protection and disaster recovery, it may seem duplicative, which honestly, that's the name of the game right now, that each of our customers have a different level of paranoia, or vigilance would probably be a better word, and we meet them where they're at and construct a solution for them that is as hardened as they'd like it to be, which also means as much as they're willing to spend on it. But we do kind of see a best practice that in various industries, depending on the industry, is normative, compliant, and some of them are a bit more aspirational. The main difference between data protection and disaster recovery, besides the fact that data protection restores on the same production environment and disaster recovery restores on a different environment, is that they come at very different price points. And disaster recovery typically requires a much larger investment. And we will discuss exactly what the difference is. But let's start with data protection. So our customers of all verticals are coming to us and seeking our expertise on how they can be able to achieve ransomware remediation. No longer are ransomware attacks an if, they're an inevitability. And the best way to remediate ransomware is not necessarily catching it in the act. A lot of the technologies out there and technologies we use have anomaly detection embedded, but attacks will come through. And the best thing that you can seek to garner is point-in-time recovery, to effectively roll back in time to a place where the attack hadn't yet happened, and be able to restore a sort of golden copy into a clean room environment. If you look at the 3-2-1 backup principle, which there are other ones, 3-2-1, I'm sure everyone knows it, but it's saying maintain 3 copies of your data on 2 different types of media, and one of them is offsite. There's a lot of redundancy that's baked in. So what seems to resonate with our customers and they feel is satisfactory in the current landscape is maintaining both snapshots on the storage level, on the storage array, and also having immutable backups with worm, write once, read many capability. A lot of terms that came up in the 70s to be able to protect against malicious activity like air gapping and immutability. Those are very orthodox terms. If you speak to some of our engineers, and I'm not going to put on a fake nerd voice or anything because that wouldn't be so nice to them, but basically they would say a true air gap is taking your data, putting on a tape, and putting it in an underground mountain in Pennsylvania. The problem is, in a post-cloud world where everything is expecting everything to happen nearly instantaneously, you're not going to meet your recovery time objectives. So we have a chance together to reconcile the orthodoxy of isolation with the recovery time objectives. And what we're seeing is that it's not only adequate, but it's compliant, and increasingly various compliance standards are looking for, especially in the financial industry, looking for immutable worm backups. So we deliver both of these with some of our services. So the first, I'll cover the immutable backups first. So we actually just launched a brand new backup offering that we are delivering to back up not only our private cloud solutions run in our data centers, but also to serve as targets for hyperscale public cloud workloads. we deliver the air gap because the backup gear that's powered by Cohesity, a vendor we chose that we're incredibly happy with, is on a completely abstracted network from anything else we're connecting to, whether it's our private backbone to the public clouds to be able to get those direct connections and those egress benefits, or to our internal public cloud offerings. And I'll get to those a little bit later. So we're offering the air gap, and then we also are offering the immutability with data locks, which are the worm backups. The user experience is incredibly streamlined, single portal to be able to self-service if the customer so desires, to be able to change their backup policy, whether they want copies immutable or not, and also to be able to restore. And our pricing for this is really simple. It's 8 cents per gig for application size data and retention. And then we give a discount for the data reduction ratio that we see. So it's sort of like profit sharing. The more efficiencies we gain, we then essentially give some of the value back to the customer. And when it comes to our robust storage offering, we offer single tenant and multi-tenant offerings for block file and object storage. And that's what we have here. And for each of these, we are able to offer snapshots, which are a log of changes, not a true deep backup file, but a log of changes that would allow the customer to have that point in time recovery if needed. The benefits of the backup solution with Cohesity, and one of the reasons why we chose Cohesity, I'll pop back to that slide for a second, and I'll discuss this when I discussed disaster recovery. We are heavily invested and have a very intimate partnership with VMware, and a significant portion of our private cloud solutions are powered by VMware offerings. And Cohesity's technology works in such a way that it restores just enough for the VM to boot and then run from the backup gear in order to have a near instantaneous recovery. So one of the key differences between backup and DR is the recovery time. The backup, even though it is able to start running and be productive near instantly, it still takes time for a backup to complete, whereas disaster recovery occurs near instantaneously and has an automated failover to a totally new environment. So what we've discussed thus far, which is more cost effective than disaster recovery, and I'll explain some of the other elements that we consider to be best practices when it comes to disaster recovery, the storage snapshots and the immutable backups are assuming that the restore is happening in the same environment, in the same production workload, regardless if they are retained on-site or off-site. So while I take a sip of my coffee, here's a map you can see. These solutions are deployed in our incredibly robust, large-scale data center footprint. So we have multi-megawatt facilities in the major metros here that are all interconnected with our private backbone. And our private backbone is also directly connected to the hyperscalers, so we could offer connectivity and unlock those security benefits, performance benefits, and egress savings. So let's talk disaster recovery now. So the goal of disaster recovery is not just retaining the data to make sure that it doesn't disappear. The goal here is automated workload failover. That when there's an event, you have a separate environment that's ready to turn on and be productive as soon as possible with the minimal amount of loss. Now, in order to achieve that, right, there are a lot of out-of-the-box solutions, and we have those in our arsenal. We use those as the technological elements. However, there's so much planning and iterating that goes into it to make sure that it actually all works as planned. So we have this continuum here, and you're constantly improving upon it. And, disaster recovery is not just a solution like we discussed with data protection. Data protection is a solution that's part of it, but it really is the amalgamation of people, processes, and tools to ensure that that goal of automated workload failover actually works. So starting in the top right here of this wheel, step one is creating a business impact analysis and identifying the reputational and financial ramifications of each one of your applications going down. And then prioritizing that when something happens, what needs to go up first, what needs to go back online first. And then once you figure out that prioritization, you can then formulate and design the technical solution, which is when DR and data protection technologies come into play. However, as your business imperatives change, as your applications and technology change, you need to continually test and optimize your plan and rewriting that disaster recovery plan. So without the people and process continually critiquing what you have here, it's not going to deliver exactly the way you want. So we have created various offerings together that make up our Rackspace Disaster Recovery as a Service solution that can help customers on each of these three elements. They can choose just one, or they can come to us for all three. And we have customers that leverage this in conjunction with the data protection solutions. Duplicative offerings, extra resiliency, that's what our customers are opening their wallet for, because they are incredibly concerned beyond their own human error what's going on out there. So the Rackspace Disaster Recovery as a Service offering is powered by our SDDC portfolio, that's software defined data center. We have various VMware powered private cloud solutions. Some are multi-tenant, some are single tenant, and I'll go over the three main offerings in a bit. But essentially, these serve as disaster recovery restoration targets for other Rackspace services, for hyperscale cloud workloads, and on-prem workloads. And we have two connectivity options. We can connect the sources to the targets in our data centers through a VPN over the public internet, or you can leverage our proprietary private global backbone, Rack Connect Global. So it all depends on your vigilance and the level of investment you're looking to make and what delivers on your preference, internal compliance, industry compliance, regulatory compliance. I mentioned that we can deliver on all three of those elements. And one thing I really want to highlight here is that we can deliver on the day zero business impact analysis, creating the disaster recovery plan, and also then once we formulate a solution, come up with a testing and optimization regimen through a very easily consumable professional service we have called Elastic Engineering. Customers are able to pay monthly for a bucket of hours to use, and what they are getting is a dedicated team of several engineers that not only help design for them, but are encouraged to continually critique the current configuration and to continually optimize it. And you're paying for it just when you. So no need to sign a giant contract and work on an SOW that takes months to formulate, we have out-of-the-box staff augmentation of professionals that live and breathe this stuff that can help you ensure that you not only create a disaster recovery plan that's effective, but also to test and optimize it over time. And even if you're just coming to us for the basic technology solution, just like all our other private cloud solutions, they are fully managed. So you're still getting the people to fully manage these solutions, saving a ton of the complexity and cost that goes into maintaining an effective disaster recovery regimen, which we see the vast majority of customers that come to us are grossly unprepared for. Just a few differences between doing this yourself or leveraging a public hyperscale cloud offering. With the public cloud, you are getting consumption-based infrastructure, which we're delivering, but you don't get the automated failover and you don't get the 24/7, 365 support. And typically with traditional DR on-prem, you're definitely not getting the consumption-based infrastructure because you're purchasing all this stuff and you don't have that automated failover and recovery process in place. Here we have our map of the SDDC portfolio, which this infrastructure serves as our DR target environments. SDDC Flex is our multi-tenant offering powered by vCloud Director. SDDC Business is a vCenter offering, and SDDC Enterprise, which is our highest level offering, is a full stack vCloud Foundation single tenant environment. So I want to go over a case study. I mentioned that there are different levels of vigilance, and this is something we did for by far our most vigilant customer that's, say, tangentially in the regulated financial industry. They were looking for a tertiary copy of their Rackspace and AWS and Azure environments. And not necessarily this customer, but the reason why a lot of entities are looking for a third copy right now, they're looking for this idea of a golden copy or a true air-gapped immutable copy, is not just because when you're creating this cyber vault where you periodically take your primary backup and then copy it to an isolated tertiary environment, not because there's a lower propensity of it being infected. The bad guys out there are launching ransomware attacks on backups to preclude companies from restoring. It's not just that. Customers are also very concerned about the government's response to a ransomware attack. And I don't know all the nuances of every country, but for instance, if the government suspects that you had received a cyber attack from a sanctioned country, it is illegal to pay the ransom. They will want to go in, investigate the situation. Legally, you are to tell the government that this happened, right? It's mandatory that you do that. But there is a chance that the government can come in and seize the backup gear, precluding you from restoring. And I mentioned that when it comes to backup, it's not instantaneous. Well, if you can prove, and this is not a guarantee, but if you can prove that you had a tertiary copy where the ports were shut off between the first backup and the tertiary copy at the time of attack, then there is no reason for that equipment to be seized because it never was exposed. So there's no reason for it to be taken in for investigatory purposes. Now, I'm not saying this customer was driven by that. They just have a penchant for resiliency given what they do. But I just wanted to mention that very interesting angle here, that it's not necessarily the attack, it's the legal ramifications that really freak customers out. So to go over the configuration here, the customer has production servers with us, VMware production servers with us in our Northern Virginia facility. They back up in their single tenant. They back up into a primary cohesity cluster, and then every so often we have automated firewall rules, that's the air gap, where they copy into the vaulted cluster, which is the third copy. If they needed to restore from the vaulted copy, they can have a clean room spun up in our multi-tenant VMware environment SDDC Flex. And the same thing is happening with AWS and Azure. We're leveraging virtual editions of Cohesity in the hyperscale public cloud, which is being replicated into the primary backup cluster in our data center, riding our private network. So that means for AWS, for instance, the starting egress rate is 9 cents a gig. They'd only be paying 2 cents a gig because they're riding our private network instead of AWS footing the bandwidth bill. So there's a benefit there. If you're backing up outside of the hyperscale public cloud into a third copy somewhere else, you're going to be bleeding out egress unless you have some sort of direct connect. Same thing for Azure. It's being backed into a rack space facility, so air gapped in an entirely non-hyperscale environment. And then we are also vaulting those into the tertiary copy. So this is the most hardened situation, what we can deliver. Not everyone is looking for this level of resiliency. What seems to be satisfactory is having immutable backups with storage snapshots and or disaster recovery. We definitely see customers having all three. We're just starting to see this concept of a cyber fault come to the forefront. So we can see, do we have any questions?
Yeah, we definitely have lots of questions coming in that I want to get to, but I do want to say thank you so much for that presentation and also point out the poll that you've already put up for me. Great work, Michael. That's for the audience out there. What additional information would you all like to get about the Rackspace solution? So lots covered, lots more to learn. This is a great way to make sure that you get exactly the follow-ups that you need. So click on that poll right now. Your future self will thank you for this. And then Rackspace will send you only and exactly what you need. So make sure you're doing that. While you do that, Michael and I, we're a little short on time, Michael, but we're going to try to squeeze in a few questions here. Okay. Let's see. If the tech is automated and you're using out-of-the-box solutions, why do I need Rackspace to manage it? What's the value add, Michael?
Sure. The benefit here is that it does take a considerable level of expertise just to manage it. And we have a very deep bench of VMware storage, network, compute engineers. So we will be able to help cut down on the CapEx significantly. But it really comes down to our expertise in formulating the business impact analysis and creating a process in which the technological solutions restore in order depending on business value and risk. I see things from the analysts that for enterprises it costs $9,000 a minute for downtime. So we're looking to minimize the cost and reputational ramifications.
Okay. Can tenants be restored between each other?
So in any multi-tenant solution, our customers are entirely isolated from each other. We also have dedicated solutions, so there is no overlap. What we can do is spin up, as I mentioned in the example, entirely new vCloud Director tenants to create a clean environment onto which a customer can restore. Even if it's a single tenant environment, depending on the situation, we can bring in swing gear that a customer can restore onto for backup. When it comes to disaster recovery, the environment is already there waiting. Whether it's multi-tenant or single tenant, it is there waiting, a completely separate environment. It's not in the same cluster or same facility even, and it is guaranteed there and all set up for the automated failover.
Okay, all right, we're pretty tight. I'm going to try to sneak in this last question here from Eric. Rackspace offers a lot of overlapping services. What's the best way to get an overall picture of the services offered and to help narrow our focus to those that are most applicable to my use case?
That's a great question. I see it's come from the outside world. I thought, that
Yeah,
would be one we threw in there.
no, that's a
Well, I
real
would say,
question.
yeah, that is like the best question you could get. I would say the best thing to do is take a look at our website, which lays out, at it gets pretty deep, but at a high level, you can see just looking at the navigation what we offer. But the best thing to do is to, request that we reach out to you, and if you're ready for a technical call, speak to one of our solution architects, and they're familiar with the entire portfolio. You see, my title has private cloud in it. We bifurcated the company between private cloud services and public cloud services. So everything that I'm talking about here is delivered from our proprietary data center footprint. We also have another half of the company that offers value-added services on top of the three major public clouds as well. So yes, we do a lot of things, and we're a multi-cloud provider. Our goal is to help customers, whether it's public or private, single tenant, multi-tenant, drive the most business value with a combination of our services. And we are not, it doesn't take as long to bring something to fruition as if you're working with like a systems integrator or, one of the big consulting firms, right? Where it's far more easily consumed.
Oh, that's awesome, Michael. And you've kind of just teased into what my last question for you was going to be, which is how to get started with Rackspace. And you gave us a few ideas, but what would you recommend as that kind of first step for anyone that wants to jump in?
I would say reaching out to us for an introductory conversation to get, we had 20 minutes here and we were discussing two very specific things to just get a lay of the land. We do a good job at laying out the different domains in which we play, and then we'll get more prescriptive and detailed depending on what you're looking for.
Awesome. I love that. Well, Michael, I do want to thank you so much for being here with us. I know I kept you a bit beyond time, so I appreciate you staying to answer some audience questions, and it's been a real pleasure chatting with you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
And all of you out there who clicked on that poll, keep those answers coming in. Also, make sure you head on over to the handouts tab. Grab that Rackspace handout. It's Rackspace SDDC, Flex Disaster Recovery as a Service. This is going to walk you through how you can get flexible disaster recovery that is most importantly going to scale along with your organizational needs. So make sure you've got that handout downloaded, save that for later. Which later is now, because we're about to wrap up here. This is bringing us to the close here. I'm going to leave that poll up for another second, and we'll give away our very last prizes, and I will read the entire winners list out as well. So right now we have a $300 Amazon gift card. Quick reminder for everyone that you do need to be here live and present at the webinar in order to win. So this is going to this $300 Amazon gift card to Scott Steinhaus of Minnesota. Scott Steinhaus of Minnesota. I love it. The Midwest crew. You have won a $300 Amazon gift card. I will read the full winners list now. That's going to go to Mark Jones in Alaska, Jeanette Walling of Washington, and Scott Steinhaus of Minnesota. I keep wanting to do my Minnesotan accent. In Minnesota there, Scott, you've got your $300 Amazon gift card. You enjoy that there. I lived in Minnesota, so I feel like I can do that, and I love all my Minnesotans out there. All right, well, if you are a lucky winner, we will follow up with you after we wrap, as well as those best question gift cards. So keep in mind, we're reviewing all the questions asked in each one of our sessions, and then we follow up with the best question asked in each session, so stay tuned for that. Paul, thank you so much. Paul says thanks to the whole ATM crew out here. Always appreciate seeing that. And Bonnie's sending a big congrats to all the winners. Love the good vibes coming in today. What a nice group. I don't know about you guys, but I felt like today was Friday coming into the day, and it has really messed with my head. But at least that puts you in a nice, good mood. All right. Well, with that, we are going to wrap things up. I do want to remind all of you that if you are on the EcoCast today and thinking that your team, your organization might have something that you'd like to share with the team out here. Oh, Scott, I see one of our winners just said, yay. Yay, Scott. I'm glad you're getting your gift card. Congratulations. Hope it's a beautiful day over there in Minnesota. All right, so if you'd like to come and sponsor an event, an EcoCast, a MegaCast, whatever you have in mind, shoot us a message at connect@actualtechmedia.com. We would love to get that conversation rolling with you. All right, my friends. Well, with that, on behalf of the Actual Tech Media team, I want to once again thank all of our awesome speakers that we had here with us today from Rubrik, from CrashPlan, from Rackspace, really for making this EcoCast possible. But, you know, as I always say, these webinars are only possible because of all of you out there. Otherwise, I'm just weirdly talking to myself in my apartment here in an empty little room without any friends out there. So you guys are really what makes this happen and what makes this tick. So thank you for being my friends. Thank you for coming. Thank you for talking to us, asking some great questions, and really kind of digging into some of these more innovative ways that we can protect that all important data. And that really is something that is worth considering, because what we can do with our data is kind of limitless, right? And we're just scratching the surface and exploring all the incredible things that we can do. But if we can't protect it, if we can't recover it in a bad situation, then what's the point of having had all this incredible data to start? So be sure that you're putting some time and energy into this and taking action on some of the cool things that we learned about today. And I hope that you feel powered up to do so. I hope that you've gotten some of those resources that are going to make you feel a little bit better equipped for those challenges. But best of all, and most of all, as always, thanks to the folks. I'm seeing lots of thank yous and high fives coming in. I love that. Good vibes there today. And I was just going to say, I hope, as always, that the best part of your day was just having a little fun with all of us as we learned. So thank you for taking that time. Now, please do come back and join us for an EcoCast on Tuesday, September 26th at noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. We'll be talking about adopting and accelerating DevSecOps. This is such a cool conversation. We're going to be talking with Kasten by Veeam. DevSecOps is such an interesting approach and a really cool thing to kind of explore. If you have not spent time exploring the idea of DevSecOps at your organization, this is going to be a great intro. So come hang out with us on the EcoCast on Tuesday, September 26th, noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. All right. Well, I hope that I get to see you all again there. If we haven't talked before, I hope you have absolutely beautiful ends to your weekends, whenever I get to see you again next, and enjoy the rest of your day, folks.